In this comparative study, I will answer the question, how does the use of cinematography in the films by Agnes Varda and Wong Kar-wai change the perception of women according to voyeurism theories derived from feminist film theory? In order to respond to this question, I will compare and contrast Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7 and Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. I believe these two films are appropriate for this study as they both have a female protagonist who is viewed voyeuristically, although the films are set in different geographical locations and filmed at different times. In Cléo from 5 to 7, the protagonist is a popular French singer. Those around her, including herself, value her beauty. In The Mood for Love, the female protagonist who is viewed voyeuristically is Mrs. Chan, who is similarly praised for her outward feminine traits by her neighbors around her. Voyeurism, first defined by Sigmund Freud as scopophilia, is the act of viewing an individual as an object, subjecting them to a curious and controlling gaze. From a feminist film critic perspective, many films today have elements of voyeurism, but more specifically, the male gaze. Laura Mulvey, feminist film theorist, uses the term the male gaze to show that women are simultaneously looked at and displayed, their appearance a strong visual. The male gaze is enforced not only by the audience and the director, but most importantly, through the camera. The female gaze is the opposing force to the male gaze. In Film and Masquerade, Theorizing the Female Spectator by Marianne Doan, she argues that the female spectator lacks the distance that voyeurism dictates, and women can indulge and inhabit their feminine identity. Hence, the female gaze shows that women are not viewed as an erotic object intended for the male viewer. In both my selected films, while both protagonists are seen voyeuristically, the cinematography can be interpreted from either a female or male gaze, which makes for an interesting exploration. But first, the cultural contexts of each film must be investigated. Agnes Varda's film follows 2 hours in the life of Cleo, who is waiting a cancer report to see if she is dying or not. In the period after the World Wars, France was becoming more and more liberal-minded. Paul Smith states from Feminism in the Third Republic that massive French women had performed their patriotic duty on the Second Front. Feminists not only rallied to the tricolor, but were recognized by the state as valid interlocutors on the behalf of women. France supported women who were becoming more independent. The question raised is whether this context changed the perception of women on screen, or were they still regulated to appealing to the male fantasy. The next selected film, Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, is a romantic drama which centers around Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chan, who find out that their spouses are cheating with each other, and trying to understand the motives of their spouses, they begin reenacting the affair, and eventually develop love for each other. The movie is set in 1962 Hong Kong, and this is significant because the 1960s marked the beginning of Hong Kong's post-colonial modernity. Chin Peng Lei states in the thesis Mobility, Gender, and Nostalgia in Wong Kar-wai's Cinematic Hong Kong that the spaces of a hotel and cafe offer freedom and pleasure to women. Hence, similar to Cleo from 5 to 7, due to the rising liberal values, women in Hong Kong have more independence. Yet, the question I will investigate is whether they are portrayed on screen in a non-erotic way. Both films utilize elements that can be explored to uphold or challenge the male or female gaze. In The Woman in the Keyhole, Judith Mayne agrees with Mulvey's male gaze theory, in that most classical films create spectacles by defining objects of the look, referring specifically to the female, their to-be-looked-atness. This effect of women being viewed with a certain looked-atness can be seen by the use of camera movement and proxemics in both films, specifically tracking shots. In looking at movies, these tracking shots offer the audience a larger, more panoramic view than the shot taken from a fixed camera. This guides our attention to characters or actions that are important, and are effective at setting scenes of great scope. Voyeurism can be seen in this film most directly as Cleo faces scrutiny because of her beauty and fame. She is under pressure to reflect her feminine pop self. In the movie, the director utilizes high-angle, long tracking shots. In this scene, Cleo is walking through the streets of Paris. Hence, by using the distance of the camera, the director shows how Cleo is the female subject to be looked at. The camera dictates how the viewer is voyeuristically watching Cleo. She continues about her day, unknown that the camera is above her. Moreover, the high angle of the camera nods to a power dynamic. Men in Cleo's life continue to dictate and have power over her music choices, making sure that her image remains feminine. Likewise, in the Mood for Love, camera movement and proxemics define how the audience sees Mrs. Chan voyeuristically. For instance, when Mrs. Chan walks with Mr. Chow after a restaurant meal, the medium tracking shot focuses on Mrs. Chan's legs. Y uses this movement to make the audience see Mrs. Chan as though a voyeur, for making them see her and admire her appearance. And this effect can also be seen here. However, the claim that camera movement and proxemics enable voyeurism can't be challenged. Instead, Varda and Y's camera decisions can actually show the agency and mobility the female characters have. As Cleo walks through Paris, the tracking movement can be interpreted as Varda demonstrating that a female protagonist has the ability to walk from one place to the next. And instead of the long shot spying on Cleo, it can be instead showing the freedom Cleo has to walk alone without a man. In France, the emergence of second-wave feminism was occurring at the same time period at which the movie was made. Large numbers of women were also employed in the expanding service sectors of the economy, and these women enjoyed particularly high levels of security. Moreover, Y's medium tracking shots have a similar effect, highlighting Mrs. Chan's ability to be mobile. Like in France, women in Hong Kong were able to gain more independence. In Gender Change in Hong Kong, Eliza W.Y. Lee notes how women started to gain more access to employment and education. They participated in revolutions and even military operations. Thus, as women in France as well as Hong Kong were gaining more freedom, each director's camera choices nods to a newfound freedom for women. To further examine the effect of voyeurism on the female protagonists, both directors use framing. Evan Pushak, under the YouTube name Nerdwriter, analyzes how Wong Kar-wai uses framing by placing objects in the foreground. He enhances the feeling the characters have of being observed, not to mention our own feelings of being observers. Hence, the use of framing by Varda and Y emphasize how the viewer can be a voyeur. In the Mood for Love, under scrutiny of the voyeuristic audience, the interpretation of watching Mrs. Chan through a window, doorway, or opening, we see the accentuation of Mrs. Chan's female body, her maternal body fetishized. Laura Mulvey, in Visual Pleasure and Narrative, notes how one part of the fragmented body destroys the Renaissance space, the illusion of depth demanded by the narrative. It gives flatness, the quality of a cutout or icon, rather than the verisimilitude to the screen. Likewise, in Cleo from 5 to 7, Varda uses framing to accentuate Cleo's external beauty, hence portraying her as a visual pleasure. In this shot here, Cleo is viewed from the hat shop window, and she is framed within the mirror. Adhering to Mulvey's theory of the male gaze, the audience is viewing Cleo in a scopophilic way. She is trapped within a shop that helps her achieve what she is best known for, her looks, and the audience sees her almost like a zoo animal, signifying her to be looked at-ness. Varda makes the audience question Cleo's character, namely her shallowness, makes the audience wonder if she has any qualities beyond appealing to the voyeur, or if she is trapped within the strict gender roles of her time period. Varda also uses framing to question the motives of the voyeur, or the audience. Viewing Cleo through a window makes the audience see her as a caged animal, but Varda also ensures that the audience is uncomfortable with the shot. The reflective properties of the window and array of hats makes us squint to see Cleo, verifying the audience's voyeuristic qualities in what should be a private moment. Yet, the use of framing by each director can also show the use of the female gaze. Chang Peng Lei states how Wong captures how women move. The emphasis on feet implicitly reassigns agency and mobility to the Chinese woman. From Lei's argument, the framing of Mrs. Chan's feet in a shot like her walking to the restaurant and up the stairs show agency. Moreover, Y's use of tight framing, such as in the restaurant, contributes to the idea of gender equality. Both characters, Mrs. Chan and Mr. Chow, are seated equally in the frame, both characters having an equal position in the discovery of their spouse's cheating, with neither character blaming each other for causing the affair. Also, when Mrs. Chan is tightly framed within windows or doorways, she is often in deep thought. She is thinking about what she should do. The use of frames within frames exemplify her conflicted state, to save face or be angry with her husband. Hence, instead of showing off Mrs. Chan's body for the purpose of an erotic appearance, Y is instead allowing Mrs. Chan to express her emotions. In Cleo from 5 to 7, Varda's use of loose framing in the park ironically comments on the negative effects of viewing women voyeuristic. Cleo is centered between the leafy trees, singing and dancing. This exemplifies the freedom she feels in a seemingly private moment. But as Cleo descends the stairs and stops, her emotions shift from joy to self-consciousness as she is framed with lead space. The significance of this is that Cleo realizes the state of her condition, that she is watched in a voyeuristic way. For the audience, Varda creates a guilty feeling when they view the female protagonist in a voyeuristic way. The audience has led her to feel demeaned and small. In conclusion, to answer the question, both directors utilize film elements to show two sides of the coin. Framing and camera proxemics are used to show voyeurism, with the female protagonist specifically being shown in a sexual or erotic manner at some points. However, considering the context of more liberal-minded Hong Kong and Paris, these film elements can be used to show the new agency and mobility of the female protagonists.